Hello to you. I hope you're having a blessed day. Today, I want to talk to you about anxiety, overweight, mourning. Quite the series of topics, huh? Starting off by reading the Declaration of Independence of the United States. It says, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That means they are obvious. That all men, and therefore women, are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, and among these are life, freedom, and the pursuit of happiness. So it begins by emphasizing the obvious, that there is a Creator and that morality is imposed by Him. It tells us that these rights are God-given, and therefore they are not separate from human nature. They are given to us by our Creator. They are endowed in us. It tells us that we have the right to life. So there is no such thing as my body, my choice when it comes to somebody else's life. It tells us we have freedom, and that is to say, we should not be slaves to anybody else. But even more so, I would add onto this that we should not enslave ourselves to sin. It tells us here also that we have the right to pursue happiness. And there's a fun fact right here. There's no translation or literate translation to the word pursuit in Spanish. If you were to use it, it's more as in kind of a run after somebody, that kind of pursuit, but not the kind of pursuit that means search. So that's how it's translated in Spanish. Just a fun fact for you. Now let's focus today on what happiness it actually is. All right, given that it's part of the Declaration of Independence and how everyone is actually interested in how can I find happiness. So today we're gonna quote the book of Ecclesiastes. I am not going to be reading the whole book with you, but I can tell you that if you were to sit down for an hour and read it, you will have read through the whole thing, and you will actually understand the purpose of the book. You cannot just quote from this book and pick and choose a verse. If you were to do that, you're not going to understand the meaning of happiness. You're actually going to probably end up thinking that everything is meaningless, and that's what the author actually conveys, except with, and here's where we're going to go through that. I emphasize, if you don't read it in one sitting, you will not get the idea of the book. You will think that everything is vanity of vanities, and that is to say, in the original language, hevel. Hevel is something like steam or smoke, something you cannot hold on to, something you cannot put in your pocket, something you cannot store, something you cannot sell. Therefore, it's useless, it's meaningless. If you actually read the whole book, you're going to find and I'm going to give you a spoiler here, you'll realize that the author did discover something that made things make sense, especially life itself and men itself. But he even gets value out of everything that he called hevel before, and he finds that it's only secondary value though. And the first thing that has the primary value is that you have to fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of a man. And that's written towards the end in Ecclesiastes 12:13. If you're going to believe that this book was written by the same Solomon who left us the Proverbs, he actually wrote something similar in Proverbs, where he said, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. You can find that in Proverbs 1:7. Okay. Now the writer of Ecclesiastes, he tried to take various paths or shortcuts to what one might consider would bring happiness, and these are some of the things he tried. And let me know, you did the same as I did, try to take these paths, and all you found was a road without an exit. Okay, so he worked very hard. He actually devoted all his efforts to work, and he found out that this was hevel. He had roles of power, and he found that this was hevel. He sought to educate himself with various kinds of studies. This was hevel. He tried and succeeded in actually accumulating belongings and wealth. He found out that it was hevel. He tested the best foods. He drank the best liquors. Hevel. He actually sought to find happiness in women, or not just women, but the pleasure of sex outside of monogamous marriage, which is commanded by God. And again, if we are to believe that this was Solomon, we can say that he did so with more than 1,000 women. And what he found at the end of the road is that it was hevel. He knew that his name and his exploits would go down in history, but that the man behind them would die. And therefore, he himself was Hevel. Pretty joyous words, huh? Now, in the day of prosperity be joyful, but in the days of adversity consider. God also hath set the one over against the other, to the end that a man should find nothing after him. Ecclesiastes 7:14. This gives you a very, very good idea of how this person felt. My last message was actually about the loss of my baby. This was months ago. For some, the fact that it was an unborn baby or that it was such an early loss, it will make them feel like what I'm about to say is an excuse. But I was plunged into mourning, and I had a kind of depression where I was not looking for anyone to give me words of encouragement or motivation. It was actually a self-induced kind of depression, and I didn't want it to go away. I didn't want to let go of it. I've actually had a very cold time with my best friend, with my comforter, Jesus Christ, during this time. And I need to explain where this coldness comes from and what I mean by it. So a part of me wanted to be able to actually get angry with God, and I wanted to be able to blame him or even to complain with him, but that was not what happened to me. On the contrary, far from being able to get angry, I found myself thanking God, because from this very early moment he took my baby, and he is going to be taking care of my little angel. I constantly remember, after my moments when I would be crying, David's words in 2 Samuel 12:20-23, where it says, "But now he is dead, wherefore should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me." And that is exactly how I felt. I am sure, as David was sure back in his days, that I'm going to meet with my baby. But not just that, I'm sure that I'm going to meet with God. Why? Because I rest assured in my salvation, and I hope you can do so as well. So I discovered that every time something asked me to complain, instead I remember that comfort in the absence of trials is not something that God offered me. It is not part of the deal that Jesus Christ told me I would be taken care of. As a matter of fact, and on the contrary, I was told that if I was willing to follow him, I would be having to pick up my cross, and that just as the whole world was against him, it would be against me. So I want to give you a word of warning here. This is just a small downside, actually, and it doesn't even come close to the plethora of the other promises and blessings that we receive from Jesus, such as the underserved grace that we have. So it's actually minimal, but it's something you do have to keep in mind. People that are promised that they will receive happiness when they start following Jesus, people that are promised health, wealth, prosperity, and these things never come because they are not what Jesus promises by following him, they are very likely to be turned away when these things don't happen. And they're very likely to never believe in the real Jesus, but in the wallet Jesus, in the cure Jesus, who is not all that he is. It's just a very small portion of what he is. It's very secondary to what he actually promises. So although I did not lose my faith, or perhaps get lost during this process, I was in a very cool relationship with Jesus. I know some people might have lost their way completely if this were to happen to them, but again, it all goes back to the kind of faith that you have. In fact, I took this non-fasting part of what David mentioned in the 2 Samuel very literally, to the point that I was very greedily and unrestrainedly overeating. So I did a personal record of mine in overweight, and I can tell you that's not a personal record you ever want to break. So I was doing this out of anxiety, of course, out of spite of myself, to be honest. So getting back to today's topic, though, I wanted to allude to how various times during this particular period in time I wasn't particularly happy, and it's just something you don't feel. You don't feel the happiness. You don't feel like smiling. You don't feel like partying. You don't feel like doing anything at all. And even though that was the case, though, I didn't lose my base happiness. That one remained. So where am I going with this? And this is the point that I want to make. If my faith in God is strong, when my blessings are at their maximum, and my happiness is through the roof, and if my faith is shortened when difficulties and suffering come, then my faith is very subjective, and it depends on fluctuating things over which I have no control. And I can tell you, if this is what you're basing your faith on, it will be shattered. It's not a strong pillar on which you can build your faith. But if, on the other hand, my faith is strong because of the fact that God is the logical and the most convincing answer to why man, to why life, to why everything exists, and if I am sure of the fact that Jesus died on the cross for me, for my sins, then seeing these factors, then I can be sure that anything else that comes my way, happiness, well-being, money, whatever you call it, is just going to be an extra. My faith is unshakable. My faith cannot be broken. If anybody were to try and come and convince me that Jesus did not rise from the dead in the way he did, they would have to disprove thousands of years of this same kind of idea, where they feel like they can disprove the fact that he rose from the dead. They haven't been able to this point. Nobody will be able to do so at this point. So my faith is unbreakable, and with that I have an underlying happiness that is not breakable either. My message today then, though, is that it is not to tell you that I have found a way to be happy at all times. That's impossible. But it is to let you know that even when happiness does not seem to be within reach, it's not within your horizon, you do not see it, you cannot feel it, you do not have any expectations of happiness coming your way. Sometimes actually things pile up and everything goes completely the opposite way, and it continues to go the opposite way. There's just no happiness in sight. There's no respite. You cannot think of anything that will make you feel better. Even if that's you in this moment, God assures you that he will not abandon you through this. As a matter of fact, God also knew of the pain of losing a loved one like I did. He cried for Lazarus. You can read about that, John 11:35 and around it. He was hungry. He was like you and me. He can get hungry. Matthew 4:2. As for pain, you can just read the ending chapters of any of the four Gospels and you'll see what pain is. I'm sure none of us has gone through pain of that sort. And even though I was close to dying of COVID a couple of years ago and I was in the hospital for 13 days, that's nothing compared to what my God had to go through on the cross. So among all these human sufferings, he actually promises, like I was telling you, he's not going to abandon us. And there will be an eventual respite as we reunite with him in his kingdom, where he will wipe away all these tears. And even if this happens within 50 years, if it happens tomorrow, you never know when your time's coming up. It will be the time when you will have your respite, and it will be eternal, and it will be pleasant, and it will be complete. So I encourage you, continue looking for God. Don't give in to anxiety, gluttony, overeating. It's not worth it. Only way you can actually fix this after getting into it is a lot of prayer, a lot of motivation, and this motivation can only be found through actually God. So jump up, get into it. I want to wish you the very best today, that you may find happiness, that you may pursue after it in the correct pattern, and that is by going after Jesus Christ. I wish you the best of the best, and send you a big hug with a blessing. God bless.